You slowly drift to alertness. You must have been knocked unconscious. You open your eyes and see a black, featureless sky above you. Not a single star to be seen, despite the apparent midnight that lies above you. You sit up and look towards the horizon, and see what looks to be a distant, faint sun, although sun is a strong word for that frail white dot on the horizon. As you look around you, trying to get your bearings, you see that you sit upon a thin stretch of land, seemingly made entirely of raw, cracked and broken obsidian, occasionally broken by odd-looking plants. On either side of this stone path you see a seemingly endless sea of small, shining beads of dark glass. The last thing you remember before waking up is a strange conversation you had with an even stranger man on a riverbank, his hair stark white in defiance of his seemingly young age. You were asking him about legends you had heard of a distant place where the power of thoughts ruled, and how you so wished you could go there. You remember him placing his hand upon your shoulder and saying, just before you blacked out, "If that is what you wish, my unfortunately naive acquaintance, I can grant it. I wish you all the luck I care to spare. Shadesmar is not kind to visitors." Hi, my name is Braden Bain, and this is Cosmere Questions. The Cosmere as a setting is split into three distinct dimensions, or realms as they're called. There's the physical realm, which is often called the normal one. There's the cognitive realm, which is often called Shadesmar. And then there's the spiritual realm, which is often called weird and confusing. But that is a vast oversimplification of this topic, and brings to mind the question, what exactly are the three realms of the Cosmere? In answering this question, I'm going to split this video up into two sections. The first part will be a simple explanation that encompasses the basics of how these three realms work, enough for you to be able to follow what characters are talking about in these stories whenever the topic comes up. The second part will be an in-depth discussion on how the mechanics of these connected dimensions function for those who are interested in the nitty-gritty of the mechanics and interactions between the realms. In this second part, I will expound upon some things that may seem like I glossed over in the first part, so if it seems like I'm not giving something its due time, just wait until the longer section and I'll probably hit it there. The concept of animism, the belief that objects, places, and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence and or soul, is a provable fact in the setting. In the Cosmere, everything from the smallest, most stubborn stick to the largest and most graceful castle has their own thoughts and soul that can be interacted with and, using some of the different magic systems of the Cosmere, manipulated. The three realms, the physical, cognitive, and spiritual, build the framework for how the people, deities, and everything in between experience existence throughout the entirety of the Cosmere. The physical realm is the realm of the body, and is where all physical beings and objects reside. When you think of the world around you, you are thinking of the physical realm. It is a direct analog to our own world in the way that it looks, as well as how it acts concerning physics, distance, and time. I bring that up because once we go to the other realms, things can start to get weird. In the physical realm, the planets of the Cosmere exist in a star cluster of 50 to 100 stars inside of a dwarf galaxy. Outside of this cluster is a complete unknown to us at the moment, and likely will remain an unknown at least until the later stages of the Cosmere. The cognitive realm, commonly called Shadesmar, is the realm of the mind and is a reflection of the physical realm, warped to fit along a single flat plane. It is a reflection in a fairly literal sense, because in Shadesmar, everywhere where there is water in the physical realm, there is land in the cognitive realm, and vice versa. Even the sun is a warped reflection. In the cognitive realm, the sun appears as a never-moving distant dot on the horizon that pulls shadows towards it rather than casting them. In this realm, every single being or soul manifests as something depending on the nature of that being. Living beings will appear as glowing orbs floating in the relative space where their body is in the physical realm, with the brightness of their soul correlating to the size, level of sentience, and innate magical energy that that creature has. For the non-living, every object manifests as something dependent on the collective unconscious mind of the planet. On Roshar, the planet of the Stormlight Archive, unconscious souls manifest as small glass beads filling the oceans that mirror the main continent and nearby islands. The souls appear as beads because the global currency of Roshar is different denominations of gemstone held in small glass beads. On Scadrial, the planet of Mistborn, the souls of objects manifest as independent wisps of smoke in the vague shape of the objects where they generally sit in the physical realm. and the oceans are filled with a vast pooling sea of twirling mists. The imagery of mist is due to the ever-present mists, fogs, and ash clouds that cover the world. I mentioned that Shadesmar is flat, which is true across the entire Cosmere, including the space between planets. Due to this flattening, it is the most common way for people to travel between worlds, as you can enter Shadesmar, travel long enough in a straight line, and end up on a different planet. There are multiple ways to enter and exit Shadesmar, with the main one being through pools of magic energy that appear in correlation to the long-term presence of a god on the planet. The spiritual realm is the realm of the soul, and is where the large majority of magical energy originates. In the Cosmere, this magical energy is called investiture, instead of mana or anything like that. And I'll be doing a separate video on the mechanics of investiture soon, because this video is already long enough. The spiritual realm borders all parts of both other realms, because it is closer to what you may think of when you think of a higher dimension. Space and time are both irrelevant and compounded into the same shifting, pliable energy. It is the realm of the many gods of the Cosmere and where their essence resides. It's also the origin of the ability of future sight, seen in many of the gods and magic systems of the Cosmere. This future sight is heavily flawed, however, due to it relying on simulating possible changes in both the present and future and watching how timelines would shift if that possibility went into effect. Now, this isn't a multiverse thing. Everything seen in the spiritual realm is just a vision or simulation of alternate events, and nothing inside these visions are actually real, sentient, or aware. Now, it is possible for a non-deific entity to enter into the spiritual realm, but it is a confusing and dangerous experience, mostly due to the spiritual realm existing outside of / above space-time. If a person entered into the spiritual realm, they would be pushed and pulled towards visions of their own past and future, with incomprehensible spaces in between. Inside of the spiritual realm, time also becomes difficult to keep track of, and severe time dilation can occur, due to this realm existing outside of typical space-time. This can cause what seems like hours in the spiritual realm to actually be days in the physical realm, or in contrast, hours could pass in the physical realm while decades have gone past for someone in the spiritual realm. Now we enter into the complicated. I'll be using a lot of bigger science words because the physics of this setting are actually extremely well fleshed out, even to the extent of how a contained time dilation field in the physical world will affect things passing through it. But don't worry, I believe in you, you can survive this. These things have all been canonized through books in the Cosmere, as well as through confirmations from Brando Sando, as well as from Peter Ahlstrom, the vice president of editorial for Brando Sando's company, Dragonsteel Entertainment. Now don't get me wrong, there is plenty of hand-waving in the magic systems, with an example being the previously mentioned contained time dilation fields and the reactions to redshift effects. But that hand can only be waved so selectively due to the intense work that the team at Dragonsteel does to canonize and provide consistency to the magic systems in the Cosmere. The physical realm is the easiest to explain due to it having the easiest starting point. All laws of physics that exist in the real world are majorly unaffected in the physical realm, and that concerns both classical physics as well as quantum physics. It is a rare inclusion in the books, but we have seen examples of quantum entanglement in the Cosmere, as well as an example of the observer effect, where the size of a randomly changing spirit was contained as soon as it was measured and recorded. The many magic systems of the Cosmere do not disobey the laws of physics or thermodynamics, even though it may seem they do at first glance. Instead, they use an extra variable, investiture. Investiture is magic spiritual energy that can be treated as an additional variable in Einstein's equation E=mc². In that equation, mass and energy are interchangeable at an extremely high conversion rate. Mass can be converted into a massive amount of energy, and an equally massive amount of energy can be turned into mass. Investiture can be treated as an additional variable in that equation. However, it currently has an unknown conversion rate between itself, energy, and mass. It can be assumed, however, that the relative power of investiture is higher than energy, due to investiture existing as an accelerant in the process of invested matter energy transference, found in the novel The Lost Metal. Light spoilers ahead for Mistborn Era 2, Book 4. In this book, near the beginning, the main group initiates a contained fission reaction that destroys an entire lab by contacting two different superheated metals made of the solidified investiture of different deities, one of which had the property to repel all other investiture. The physical realm is composed of particles known as axi, with the singular form being a single axon. An axon is a fairly one-to-one comparison with an atom in our real world, with subaxial particles being the nucleus, electron, and proton. Axii have even been shown in the Cosmere to have anti-axial counterparts, similar to anti-atomic particles we've discovered in the real world. However, due to the addition of investiture as a variable, as well as the interactions of the different realms and the latent magic in the Cosmere, nuclear physics differs slightly to our normal world, specifically when it comes to energy transference during atomic separation. Because of this, the team at Dragonsteel is hesitant to cause axial fission a nuclear reaction, due to there being enough different variables in the Cosmere compared to the real world that certain things differ, but that's about as solid as we've gotten. If I ever get the opportunity to meet Mr. Sando, one of the possible questions I would ask him would be, when axons are separated, is there an outburst of axial radiation in the same way that nuclear radiation is generated, or is that able to be hand-waved as an expelled investiture, so that radiation sickness and poisoning don't have to be an omnipresent worry in the future eras of the Cosmere? In the Cosmere, there are 10 primary planets: Scadrial, Sel, Taldane, Threnody, First of the Sun, Roshar, Nalthis, Komashi, Canticle, and Lumar, most of which have established stellar systems that they inhabit, containing everything from moons to other inhabited planets to gas giants, asteroid belts, and other unknown anomalies. I'll eventually make a more in-depth video on the planets of the Cosmere, but until then, I would recommend an excellent video from a channel called Lore of the Worlds. The video is a couple years old, so it doesn't contain any information on the worlds of Komashi, Canticle, or Lumar. It does, however, contain a pretty big spoiler for the Stormlight Archive, so be warned going into that if you do end up watching it. The cognitive realm, more commonly called Shadesmar, is where things start to get a bit more complicated. The physical realm is also complicated, but I say more when it comes to Shadesmar because the physical realm is only as complicated as the real world, plus a few extra variables. Shadesmar is an entirely new thing, so our frame of reference essentially has to start from scratch. Shadesmar is a reflection of the physical realm in a couple major ways, the first and most impactful being the geography. In Shadesmar, the geography of the physical realm is flipped. Where there is water in the physical realm, there is land in Shadesmar, and vice versa. Physical continents are instead massive Shadesmar oceans. Islands are lakes, and lakes are islands. Rivers are instead thin paths of land cutting through vast seas. Another reflection of the physical realm is the sky. Shadesmar has a sun, but rather than being the big bright sun we're used to, the sun in Shadesmar is small, faint, and sheds a dim white light. The realm is paradoxically illuminated as if a normal-sized sun hung in the sky, but the Shadesmar sky is completely black and featureless, with the small, frail, unmoving sun being the only break in the dark abyss that hangs above the realm. The sun also affects the shadows it creates, pulling them toward it rather than casting them away. Shadows, created by other means of light, act normally, but it is common to have two shadows while in Shadesmar, one cast from whatever light source you may have, and another stretching towards the strange sun that inhabits the sky. The realm is split into a couple different classifications depending on the area. The areas that are reflecting planetary bodies are called the subastrals. The Shadesmar reflection of the planet that Mistborn takes place on would be called the Scadrian subastral. The spaces between planets have been referred to as the Great Expanses, and our only source outside of specific questions that have been asked to Mr. Sando is a subastral map of Roshar that can be found inside the first Stormlight Archive novel, The Way of Kings. On this map, we can see the Rosharan subastral in the center, and three named expanses. The expanse of the densities, which we know leads towards the planet Sel. The expanse of the vapors, which we know leads to Scadrial. The expanse of vibrance, which is covered by the label of Shadesmar in this image, but we do know is there, leads to Nalthis. And the expanse of the broken sky, which Brando Sando and the team at Dragonsteel have been very reluctant to confirm where it leads, so we aren't sure of that yet. One thing that the wiki pages seem to contradict themselves on is whether the expanses lead to different subastrals or are the different subastrals. But having read nearly everything that Mr. Sando has said on record concerning the topic, it is my understanding that the Great Expanses are the reflection of the space in between worlds, and therefore not the actual subastrals for said planets. Shadesmar is the realm of the mind, and therefore is heavily influenced by the minds of the people that inhabit the different realms of the Cosmere. The realm will shift and change to match the ideas and subconscious preconceptions of the nearby people as a whole. These shifts will change how each subastral appears depending on the culture and myths people have on the planets it is reflecting. Even the way that people view the land can have extreme effects on how the subastral manifests. This can be seen with how the water of the oceans appears as something that is present in the common subconscious of the planet's overall population, as I explained in the more simple explanation earlier. If Earth existed in the Cosmere, our subastral seas may manifest as being filled with shreds of discarded plastic that are bent and shaped to look like the objects they're reflecting. Or they could be filled with a writhing sea of electricity and digital icons and desktop folders. So there's another entry to my list of things to ask Brando Sando if I ever have the chance to meet him. If Earth was put into the Cosmere, what would the subastral seas be filled with? The minds of mortals affect the cognitive realm in more ways than just how it manifests in looks. In fact, the likely more impactful way that it is affected is its size. The realm of Shadesmar exists on a flat plane, and each subastral is bent to fit that plane. But as you may know, you cannot flatten a globe without severe distortions to the map. The Cosmere reconciles this in a combination of a few different ways. The first that you may read about from the Dragonsteel team is that each subastral is split into a form of Dymaxion map projection. However, the edges of the map conjoin to each other depending on where the viewer is, so that you never reach an edge. This is possible due to the fact that because Shadesmar is a separate realm, the rules of Euclidean geometry can be shifted to make mental concepts work despite normal physics saying otherwise. However, one of the largest reasons that projections don't quite work in Shadesmar is the fact that Shadesmar is already warped in terms of its size. That warping is based on the relative cognitive energy of the populace being used to think of different areas. As an Earth-based example, New York City is absolutely massive, with millions of people living there, and therefore, millions of people are constantly thinking about the size and layout of the city, and that would reflect in Shadesmar. The subastral of New York City would be a perfect one-to-one when it comes to the size and layout of the city. On the other hand, take the Sahara Desert, a massive expanse of nearly unlivable desert, covering more land area than the entire contiguous United States. Other than researchers with projects that concern that area, and people in school doing reports on desert ecosystems, very few people put much energy towards thinking about that area. Even the people that do spend time thinking about it likely don't concern themselves with the precise layout and size of the desert as a whole. Therefore, the size of the Saharan subastral would be significantly compressed due to the lack of cognitive energy available to reflect its size. Even in situations where there is a large amount of cognitive energy concerning an area, it has been seen that the compression of size still takes effect in the vertical dimension. Mountains and hills are considerably shorter in Shadesmar relative to their physical counterparts, likely due to how most people aren't spending their time thinking about how tall mountains are, aside from the occasional thought where someone is using a mountain as a frame of reference to measure something. Following the same line of thinking concerning cognitive energy, an uninhabited and lifeless planet will not initially appear in Shadesmar, as there is little to no cognitive energy available to replicate it. However, if sentient life begins to develop on that planet, it will begin to grow a subastral reflection with the now available cognitive energy that is available. This same principle is the reason that travel between planets is currently possible in Shadesmar. The people of the Cosmere spend nearly zero energy thinking of the impossible space between planets, and therefore, that space is massively compressed in Shadesmar. Relatively closer planetary systems, while still being far enough apart that the distance can only be effectively measured in light years, are close enough in the cognitive realm that the journey can be taken in a matter of weeks. Even the farther systems in the Cosmere can be traveled to and from in the time span of weeks or months using conventional methods of travel, rather than taking years at light speed in the physical realm. Those who know a thing or two about physics may notice that the scenario of people moving through Shadesmar translates to them moving faster than light speed in the physical realm. Which brings to mind the question of how Brandon Sanderson intends to address the paradoxes of causality that FTL travel creates. The answer is that we don't know yet. However, it will be addressed later in the Cosmere, so just hold on to your hats until then. It may be that causality is one of the exceptions and will be hand-waved in the same way that warp speed is hand-waved in Star Wars or Star Trek. But personally, I am very interested to see how it's handled. Now, Shadesmar being separate from the physical realm doesn't mean it's empty of life. The realm is inhabited by both flora and fauna. Cognitive realm plants exist all across Shadesmar, growing using water from the physical reflection of the ground they grow on. These plants range from weeds to bushes to trees to things that we can't classify, all of which are species that do not exist in the physical realm, and are made of differing substances depending on which subastral they grow in. Cognitive fauna are more rare, the largest ecosystem we've seen being on the Rosharan subastral, where creatures known as spren have evolved, and diversified to fit specific niches feeding on the emotional energy of the people of Roshar. In the physical realm, these spren manifest as spirits that appear when high emotions are felt, as the energy of these emotions allow for small portions of these creatures to visually poke through between realms during feeding. Some of these spren have obtained an increased level of innate magical power, and therefore have increased intelligence, many of which have attained sapience. These Spren have created cities, economy, and trade between each other and between the other subastrals, and are integral to how the magic of Roshar functions. Spren, however, aren't the only beings that have built cities and industry in Shadesmar. Normal people who are aware of the realms and the vastness of the Cosmere have created cities that have lasted long enough for entire generations to have been born and die entirely in Shadesmar. One such city is the city of Silverlight, which is large enough to be known Cosmere-wide for their university, and is the base of operations for the organization known as the 17th Shard, but there's something I'll go into in another video. There are a few ways to enter and exit Shadesmar, with the primary being through places known as Shard Pools, which are a part of a wider classification known as perpendicularities. Shard Pool perpendicularities are most commonly created after a Cosmere deity, or Shard as they're called, spends a large amount of time on a planet. Due to the amount of investiture that shards control, much of it will condense into liquid form on the surface of the planet, forming a pool of energy that can be used to travel between realms. The shard can choose where the perpendicularity manifests, but in most circumstances, the shard pool will dissipate if the shard leaves the planet. There are other ways to create perpendicularities other than shard pools, as a perpendicularity will form whenever there is a large amount of investiture condensed into an area. We currently know of two different places where perpendicularities have been created outside of shard pools, those being Roshar, the planet of the Stormlight Archive, through a couple of different applications of their magic system, as well as the city of Silverlight in the Cognitive Realm, which we know has an artificial perpendicularity known as the Silverlight Nexus. The spiritual realm is the realm we know the least about, as it's only been seen extensively in one novel. It has been mentioned and its mechanics partially explained in others, but most of our knowledge comes from the team at Dragonsteel and that single novel. The spiritual realm is the realm of the soul, and is made up entirely of investiture, the magic energy of the Cosmere. This realm functions the closest to our current ideas of how a higher dimension would work, defying how normal physics are understood to function. The energy and presence of the spiritual realm permeates the entirety of the Cosmere, existing throughout both realms. However, rather than being a reflection of either realm like Shadesmar is to the physical, the spiritual realm exists between all things. It is a place that is made entirely of investiture and the abstract connections between beings. It is a place where distance and time are entirely irrelevant, because it exists outside of conventional spacetime. While inside this realm, time does not flow. However, depending on your actions and intent while inside, you can move forward through time at wildly different speeds. If you just looked in and tried to observe the incomprehensible nature of the realm, your mind would exit at the same time it went in. If you physically entered and then tried to search around for a specific piece of information or to go to a specific place, time would flow and dilate that would be nearly impossible for mortal minds to predict. Each person's soul is made up of some of the investiture that is native to the spiritual realm, and that investiture is tuned to contain what is called a spirit web, which is most simply explained as spiritual DNA. The spirit web of a person is a combination of their innate personality and physical characteristics, as well as a record of the things that have shaped them in their lives, which could be anything from the places they visited to the people they've met. Once again, I will get more into the specifics and aspects of spirit webs in a future video. One of the main ways the magics of the Cosmere use the spiritual realm is by accessing different forms of future sight. The spiritual realm allows those who look into it to see the infinite possibilities of the future. However, such an influx of information could quite easily drive an unprepared person insane. All possibilities can be seen inside the spiritual realm, ranging from possible events that will take place years in the future, to how someone would be different if something had changed in their past. These possibilities are vision-like projections, so we're not getting into a multiverse or anything, so don't worry. Due to the infinite nature of these possibilities, even the gods of the Cosmere have a difficult time reading them correctly. Events have been put into motion that deities had written off as outside the realm of conceivable likelihood, so no matter who sees what, it can always be changed. The gods of the Cosmere, known in world as the Shards of Adonalsium, or just Shards, exist as ascendant entities with incomprehensibly large consciousnesses. Now, Shards are mortal minds that have been expanded, but they haven't been expanded infinitely. I'll go more in depth on the specifics of the Shards and their powers in a separate video, and the specifics of Adonalsium in another. Just know for now that despite being theoretically omniscient and omnipresent, in practice they are neither. They are, however, very close to omniscient, which drives in the fact that the spiritual realm is far beyond what is comprehensible to mortals like you and I. And that is my answer to the question, what exactly are the three realms of the Cosmere? Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. It really does mean a lot. If it's something you enjoyed and you so deem it worthy, feel free to like the video. And if Cosmere topics and deep dives into those are something you're interested in, feel free to subscribe so you can see these more often as I post them. While writing this, I was debating separating it into a few videos, just one for each realm. But I decided to keep it all together just as a little experiment to see what goes over better, because I know personally I like longer videos, so we'll see how it gets received and everything, but let me know in the comments if you would prefer things like this, longer, more generalized videos, or more specified, like, oh hey, here's an entire video just on the physical realm. It probably would have been the same script, just split between 3 videos, so if you like that all together in a kind of a compilation format, or if you want it more individualized for what you're looking for, let me know. We'll see what works. I think going forward I'm going to alternate longer and shorter videos. I think my next couple of questions that I'm going to answer are going to be who is Brandon Sanderson for the short one, and then what is investiture for the long one. So that's going to be a very long one. So we'll see what y'all like the best. But don't quote me on that, because things may change. I don't actually know what I'm doing. I'm hoping that I can get these out about every 3 weeks, but we'll see how that happens, because I'm giving myself not a lot of time with for how much time I need to edit this one. So we'll see. I'm thinking I may change to a less intensive editing style, just to help out with that time, but also doing the alternating video lengths will probably also help with that. So we'll see. We'll see what, which comes first, which comes last, everything like that. But again, thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end, and until next time, let me know if you have any Cosmere questions.